So, I want you to picture something for a second. Obviously, if you're driving right now, please keep your eyes open.
Yeah, definitely keep your eyes on the road.
Right. But just imagine you're doing 120 down the N1. It's late afternoon, the sun is shining, maybe it's just a little bit in your eyes, but the traffic is moving along beautifully.
It's that perfect cruising speed.
Exactly. The steering wheel is dead steady in your hands, the engine is purring, and you just feel 100% in control of the situation.
But here's the thing about that feeling of control. It's often just an illusion.
Because of what you can't see.
Right. What you cannot see from that really comfortable driver's seat is that underneath you, literally just a few centimeters from the asphalt blurring past, the rubber on your rear left tire might be worn down to a slick.
Or, maybe one of your front shock absorbers has a slow hydraulic leak.
And if it does, it is barely doing its job of keeping your tire physically connected to the road. That illusion of safety you mentioned, it's perfectly maintained right up until the exact second you need to slam on the brakes.
Or suddenly swerve to avoid a piece of blown tire on the highway.
Exactly. In that split second, the illusion just shatters. The unforgiving laws of physics take over. Your worn tire cannot grip the road surface. Your leaking shock absorber cannot stabilize the massive weight transfer of a 2-ton vehicle pitching forward.
And suddenly the machine you thought you were commanding becomes, well, an unguided missile.
It's a terrifying reality.
It really is. And welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today we have a very specific mission. We are unpacking a single, really comprehensive text that takes a hard, deeply uncomfortable look at South Africa's road safety.
But we are steering clear of the usual talking points here.
Right, no pun intended. We're zeroing in on the hidden danger of mechanical vehicle failures. The ultimate goal for our deep dive today is to examine the source material, look at the data, and figure out whether the country's roadworthy testing system actually protects you, the driver.
Or if it just rubber stamps dangerous vehicles and sends them barreling down the highway.
Which is quite a heavy thought.
Yeah.
But it shifts the entire conversation, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, when society looks at the staggering road death toll in South Africa, the default response is always to blame the human element.
Sure. Reckless driving, excessive speeding, overtaking on blind rises.
Right, or people getting behind the wheel intoxicated. And to be fair, irresponsible driver behavior is absolutely the main catalyst for the vast majority of accidents. The text we're looking at today doesn't dispute that at all.
No, not at all.
But what the source material brings to light is this massive silent contributor that rarely gets a headline: mechanical failure. We are talking about vehicles that are fundamentally unsafe, sharing the road with you every single day.
Yeah, the text gives us a really specific kind of sobering statistic on that. Mechanical defects are cited in up to 13% of all local vehicle incidents.
14%.
Yeah. And I had to be honest, when I first read that, my immediate thought was, well, 14% next to drunk driving, maybe that actually sounds relatively small.
It does sound manageable at first glance.
Right. It feels like just a manageable fraction of a broader problem. Like a bad lottery you just hope you don't win.
But it is incredibly deceptive. You really cannot look at that 14% in a vacuum. You have to apply it to the physical reality of South African roads.
Which means looking at the actual cars out there.
Exactly. The national vehicle fleet is pushing toward 13 million cars. And because buying a brand new vehicle is a massive financial hurdle, I mean, it's often an absolute impossibility for most citizens, the average age of those cars on the road is approaching 11 years old.
11 years of wear and tear.
Think about what that means mechanically.
Oh, anyone who has driven an older car knows exactly what that means. You start hearing like a strange rattle in the dashboard or squeak when you turn the wheel.
And what do most people do?
They just turn up the radio. You just learn to ignore the friction. But let's actually do the math on this together based on the text.
Let's do it.
When you have a fleet of nearly 13 million cars and the average vehicle is a decade old, that 14% stops looking like a small fraction.
It's a huge number.
It translates to a terrifying volume of aging, potentially dangerous vehicles. It means that on your morning commute, you are entirely surrounded by cars that are statistically likely to suffer a catastrophic mechanical failure at highway speeds.
So we have millions of aging cars on roads that are literally rattling them to pieces. Which brings up the immediate question from the source material.
The legality of it all.
Right. If a vehicle is statistically likely to have a failing suspension or bald tires at year 11, how are people legally renewing their license discs every year?
without anyone actually verifying the car won't kill someone.
Exactly. How is that allowed?
See, that is what I couldn't wrap my head around right away. The loophole is the testing system itself. According to the text, South Africa uses what is called an event-based testing system for standard private light vehicles.
Event-based.
Yeah. In the simplest terms, a car only requires a professional, certified, roadworthy inspection when one of two specific administrative events happens. Either the vehicle changes ownership,
Like you sell to someone else?
right, or you register that vehicle across provincial lines.
Meaning you could buy a car brand new, drive it for 15 or 20 years, never move out of your province, and the government will never once ask you to prove that your brake pads actually have any friction material left on them.
It's staggering when you say it out loud.
It really is.
But okay, let's look at the actual test when an event does trigger it. Say you buy a secondhand car, you take it to the testing station.
The text outlines that process pretty clearly. It takes about 45 to 60 minutes, costs somewhere between 500 and 1,000 rand, and a certified examiner goes over roughly 40 specific safety items.
40 items. They are checking the brakes, the steering, the suspension, the wheels, the tires.
Lights, chassis integrity, seat belts, wipers.
Yeah, and I read that list and I thought, okay, 40 items. That actually sounds incredibly thorough. If they are looking at all that, how are so many cars failing on the road? Are the inspectors just missing things?
Well, it's not necessarily that the inspectors are missing things during that hour. The flaw is in the actual nature of what they are checking.
What do you mean?
The source material emphasizes that a roadworthy test under this system is strictly a minimum safety check. Let's break down what those 40 items actually mean in mechanical terms. Take the steering and suspension, for example.
Okay.
The examiner is looking for excessive play. For you listening, if you have ever driven a car where you can wiggle the steering wheel an inch or two in either direction before the tires physically start turning, that is excessive play.
Oh, I've driven a car exactly like that. It feels awful.
It means the physical metal linkages, the ball joints and control arms connecting your hands to the wheels are severely degrading.
And if a ball joint snaps at 120 kilometers an hour,
Yeah.
well, your wheel essentially folds under the car.
Complete loss of steering control.
Wow.
The inspector also checks the shock absorbers. And a lot of people think shock absorbers are just there for passenger comfort, right? Stop a bumpy ride.
Yeah, to keep your coffee from spilling.
Exactly, but mechanically their job is to push the tire down into the asphalt. If you have a hydraulic leak and the shock absorber fails, your tire will literally bounce off the road surface after hitting a bump.
Which means it's not touching the ground.
Right. And if you try to brake while the tire is in midair bouncing, you have zero stopping power.
That is terrifying. The text also mentions they look at the tires themselves, checking that the tread depth is above the legal minimum of 1.6 millimeters. And they look for dangerous sidewall bulges.
Sidewall bulges are nasty.
I was trying to picture that, actually. And the best way I could describe it is like a tire hernia.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, you hit a massive pothole, the internal steel belts inside the tire wall snap, and the only thing holding back 30 psi of explosive air pressure is a thin layer of exterior rubber just ballooning outward.
It is quite literally a blowout waiting to happen. They're also inspecting the brake pads and looking for heavily grooved brake discs.
Grooved discs.
Yeah. A brake disc should be completely smooth so the pad can clamp down with maximum surface area. If dirt and grinding metal have carved deep grooves into the disc, you lose surface area.
So it doesn't grip as well.
Worse, heat builds up exponentially, and your brakes experience what we call brake fade. You push the pedal to the floor, and absolutely nothing happens.
So an examiner goes through all these critical life or death components, right? And they sign the piece of paper. The car is declared roadworthy.
But here's the massive systemic catch that the text points out, that certification is, by definition, just a snapshot in time.
A snapshot in time.
It only tells the government that the car was safe to operate on that specific Tuesday at 10 in the morning. It does not guarantee the vehicle will still be safe 6 months later, let alone 50,000 kilometers down the line.
I keep coming back to this analogy to explain the absurdity of this snapshot system. It is like only going to the doctor for a checkup when you change your legal name or move to a new house.
That's exactly what it is.
Think about it. You could go decades without seeing a doctor, completely ignoring every single symptom your body gives you, simply because your home address hasn't changed.
Right. The system doesn't trigger a visit.
A car in South Africa could bounce through massive rim-bending potholes every single day. It could cover hundreds of thousands of kilometers on rough, corrugated dirt roads. But as long as the owner stays in the same province, and doesn't sell the car.
They never have to prove to any authority that the vehicle is still safe to operate.
The snapshot was taken a decade ago, and the system just assumes those brake pads are magically regenerating.
Which naturally forces us, and the authors of the text, to look beyond our own borders. How do other nations handle this exact same threat of mechanical decay? Because this event-based snapshot approach is certainly not the global standard.
Not at all. The sources provide a really clear comparative analysis here, and the contrast in regulatory aggression is just wild.
Let's start with the United Kingdom.
Okay, the UK.
They utilize the MOT test. There is no waiting for someone to sell a car. It is purely chronological. The testing starts the exact moment a car reaches 3 years of age, and from that point forward, it is repeated annually.
Every single year, you have to prove your car belongs on the road.
Every year. And the depth of the MOT goes far beyond a visual inspection of a tire hernia. They plug into the vehicle's onboard diagnostics, the OBD port.
So they're hooking a computer up to it.
They are essentially communicating directly with the car's brain to find hidden faults that haven't even triggered a warning light yet. They are checking the electronic stability modules, the ABS sensor readings, the airbag deployment systems.
And emissions too, right?
Yes, they also measure exhaust emissions to ensure environmental compliance.
Wow. But even the UK seems almost lenient compared to Japan. The Japanese system just blew my mind.
Oh, Japan operates the shaken test. And like the UK, it starts at year 3, but then it occurs every 2 years. The sheer mechanical rigor of this test is hard to overstate.
What do they do differently?
They don't just look at the brake discs. They actually use dynamometer braking tests.
A dynamometer. What is that? Like a treadmill for a car?
Imagine exactly that. A giant treadmill built into the floor. They place the wheels on these massive steel rollers and force the car to brake against immense mechanical resistance. They measure the exact stopping force of every individual wheel.
That is incredibly precise.
It is. If your left brake grabs slightly harder than your right brake, an imbalance that would cause the car to spin out during emergency braking in the rain, you failed the test.
And the failure rate is astronomical, right?
Right.
The text noted a massive 30 to 40% failure rate for older cars.
Yes, 30 to 40%.
Yeah.
The Japanese standards are so exacting that it essentially forces older, poorly maintained cars off the road entirely.
Because it's too expensive to fix them.
Exactly. Repairing an aging car to meet the shaken standard becomes cost prohibitive, so owners just scrap them and buy new ones. And then you have Germany's TÜV system,
Right, the German system.
which requires checks every 2 years. They put the cars on hydraulic lifts and meticulously hunt for structural underbody rust that could compromise the crash safety cage, alongside full electronic safety testing.
And the data proves this chronological approach actually saves lives. The text highlights European Union statistics showing that mandatory, regular periodic inspections reduce fatal crashes by 10 to 20%.
They're simply catching those worn shock absorbers and grooved brake discs early on.
Intervening before the laws of physics turn a standard commute into a tragedy?
The international data makes a watertight case for annual or biennial testing.
Okay, but I have to push back here, though.
Sure.
Reading about Japan's dynamometers and Germany's rust inspections is great. It sounds like this highly engineered, perfect utopia. But we are talking about the reality of South Africa here.
Very different reality.
We have an incredibly tough, strained economy. People are already delaying basic vehicle maintenance like oil changes or new wipers just to save enough cash to put food on the table or, keep the lights on. So if we imported a Japanese-style test tomorrow with a 40% failure rate, wouldn't that completely paralyze the working class? You would be grounding a massive portion of the population who absolutely rely on their 11-year-old cars just to get to their jobs.
You've hit on the exact friction point the source material wrestles with. You really cannot just copy and paste a first-world regulatory framework onto a developing economy without understanding the local socioeconomic reality.
Else it would be a disaster.
It would. What you are describing is the catalyst for what the text outlines as South Africa's perfect storm.
The perfect storm. Break that down for us.
Let's layer the variables here. First, you take that significantly older national fleet approaching the 11-year mark.
Right, old cars.
Second, you combine it with high annual mileages because public transport infrastructure is often inadequate, which forces long daily commutes.
So old cars driving really far every day.
Exactly. Third, you factor in the severe road maintenance issues. We are not just talking about smooth asphalt. We are talking about unavoidable deep potholes that bend rims and snap tire belts. We're talking about degraded asphalt and extensive gravel networks that essentially vibrate a car's suspension components to pieces over time.
And then the economy.
Finally, you add the crushing economic strain that forces people to delay their maintenance in the first place.
Man, when you mix all of those together, the snapshot-in-time testing system doesn't just crack, it completely collapses.
The data from the local testing stations absolutely proves the collapse. The text shared some chilling, localized sampling data on this.
Yeah, I remember this part.
When authorities actually took a random sample of cars operating on the road to see their true mechanical condition, basically bypassing that event-based loophole, up to 80% of the sample cars had multiple defects.
Just pause on that for a second. 80%.
80%.
That means if you look at 10 cars around you at a traffic light, 8 of them shouldn't legally be on the road.
8 out of 10. And the most common issues they found align perfectly with that perfect storm theory we just discussed. They found tires with insufficient tread, unable to channel water away in a storm.
They found those dangerous pothole bulges we talked about.
They found worn brake pads grinding into heavily grooved discs. And here is the statistic that really exposes the failure of waiting for an ownership change.
What's that?
Globally, under an annual testing regime like the UK, only about 15% of cars develop defects between tests.
Okay, 15% globally.
But in South Africa, an astonishing 40% of vehicles develop dangerous defects between ownership transfers.
Wow. I want you to picture that as you drive. 40% of cars develop a critical fault while the owner is just holding onto the keys going about their life.
It's a huge gap.
So, are we essentially trapped in a vicious cycle here? Drivers are forced to delay maintenance to survive a really tough economy. But those very delays, combined with the brutal road conditions, create this massive 40% defect rate. And ultimately, that defect rate ends up costing us exponentially more. I mean, we aren't just paying more in insurance premiums and vehicle replacements, we are paying for it in massive tragic loss of human life on the highways.
Exactly.
We are saving a few $100 on brake pads today, but paying for it with a 14% accident rate linked directly to a machine simply giving up.
The math is grim, and the human cost is immeasurable. Which leads us to the conclusion of the text. Where do we go from here?
Right, what is the actual fix?
Well, the authors are explicit. Improving driver behavior, stopping the speeding, enforcing drunk driving laws, that must remain the absolute #1 priority.
Because human error is still the biggest catalyst.
Exactly. But we can no longer ignore the physical, deteriorating condition of the metal and rubber we are trusting our lives to.
But we've established we can't implement the Japanese system without breaking the economy.
Right.
But we clearly can't keep the current snapshot system either.
So the source proposes a highly practical middle ground. Instead of testing every single year from year 3, which might be way too heavy an economic and administrative burden right now.
Yeah, that would be tough.
Imagine a system where mandatory roadworthy tests kick in when a car reaches 5 years of age.
Oh, okay. So giving owners a bit of a grace period while the car is relatively new.
Exactly. You get those first 5 years. After that initial 5-year mark, you require regular mandatory checks every 2 years.
5 years, then every 2 years.
It acknowledges the engineering reality that modern cars are actually quite reliable for their first half-decade. But as they age into that 11-year average we talked about, the rubber degrades, the metal fatigues, and they just need monitoring.
It enforces proactive vehicle maintenance, basically creating a much-needed safety net for everyone sharing the road.
Without the extreme 40% failure shock of the strict Japanese system.
It's a compromise between economic reality and physical safety.
Yeah.
But, this brings us directly to you, the listener, because fixing the law takes time.
A lot of time.
Drafting new legislation, debating it in Parliament, passing it, and then actually setting up the physical infrastructure and manpower to test 13 million cars every 2 years, that is not happening tomorrow.
The regulatory wheels turn incredibly slowly.
So until the laws actually catch up to the mechanical reality of the roads, the responsibility rests entirely on your shoulders. You simply cannot rely on a faded piece of paper from 5 years ago to tell you your car is safe.
You really can't.
You have to be the one to physically walk around your vehicle,
Yeah.
check your tires, look at the tread depth, Run your hand along the rubber and feel for those sidewall bulges we talked about.
Well, listen for that grinding noise when you brake and actually have a mechanic look at your discs.
Do it today.
Yeah.
Do not wait for a change of ownership or a new license disc to ensure your own safety, because the physics of a highway emergency absolutely do not care about whose name is on the registration papers.
It all comes down to taking ownership of the variables you can physically control. You can't control the depth of the potholes.
Definitely not.
And you certainly can't control the erratic behavior of the drivers around you, but you can ensure your own vehicle is mechanically sound enough to execute an evasive maneuver when you need it most.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final, really provocative thought I want to leave you with to ponder.
Okay, what is it?
It is something that builds on everything we've read in this text today, but takes it one step further into the future. If a government roadworthy certificate is merely a snapshot in time, just a piece of paper that absolutely does not guarantee a car's safety 6 months down the line, how long until the insurance companies decide they have had enough?
Oh, wow. Yeah, the actuaries are definitely looking at the exact same 14% failure data we are.
If the government won't enforce a mandatory 2-year testing cycle, the insurers are the ones left paying out millions in claims when those worn brakes fail and a car is written off.
That makes a lot of sense.
Should car insurance companies start demanding their own mandatory periodic safety test just to maintain your coverage?
That would change everything.
Right. Are we heading toward a reality where private corporations, rather than national laws, are the ones actually enforcing road safety out of pure financial necessity? Will your monthly insurance premium soon depend on you submitting a yearly dynamometer brake inspection to your broker?
When financial risk outweighs regulatory patience, private intervention is usually the next logical step.
It is a fascinating shift in power, and definitely something to chew on the next time you review your policy. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great.
We hope unpacking these sources gave you some valuable aha moments and a whole new perspective on what is really happening beneath the chassis. Remember, the next time you are driving down that sunlit N1 highway at 120 kilometers an hour, enjoying the steady hum of the engine, don't just trust the illusion of safety.
Make sure the complex machine beneath you is actually ready for the moment the laws of physics take over.
Drive safe, check your tires, and we will catch you on the next one.